Have you ever seen someone's world crumble in front of their eyes? Not slowly, not with warning, not with drama, but quietly all at once, the moment they realize everything they assumed was wrong. You know that moment. That pause where their confidence doesn't disappear. It hesitates. That split second where certainty turns into confusion, and they don't yet know how to hide it. You've seen it, and what makes it even stranger is this. You didn't do anything to cause it. You didn't confront them. You didn't expose them. You didn't raise your voice or demand acknowledgement. You just stayed exactly who you were. For a long time, they thought they had you figured out. They saw your quiet as emptiness, your patience as passivity, your restraint as lack of capability. They built a whole story around that, a story where they were ahead, where they were sharper, where they had control, insight, or advantage. And you let that story exist, not because it was true, but because correcting it would have required you to step out of alignment. So you stayed silent, not absent, not unaware, silent. While they were busy talking, you were watching. While they were performing confidence, you were studying patterns. While they were reacting to moments, you were tracking consistency. That difference matters more than most people realize. You didn't rush to prove anything. You didn't try to reposition yourself. You didn't argue with their assumptions. You understood something they didn't. People reveal more when they think they're unchallenged. So you gave them space, and in that space they showed you exactly how they think, how they decide, how they protect their ego, how they avoid self-reflection. You noticed the shortcuts, the blind spots, the overconfidence disguised as certainty. And you adjusted quietly, not your personality, not your values, your preparation. You sharpened your awareness. You refined your discipline. You stopped leaking energy into reactions that went nowhere. You became precise. And precision doesn't announce itself. That's why, when the moment came, the moment reality contradicted their narrative, it felt sudden to them. To you, it was inevitable. Not in a supernatural way, not as fate. In a practical way, assumptions don't survive consistency. False narratives don't survive time. Confidence built on misreading someone eventually collapses under its own weight. You could see it happening before they did. That first sign of recalibration, that subtle shift in how they looked at you, the way they started replaying interactions in their head, searching for the moment they missed. They weren't afraid. They were uncertain. Uncertainty is uncomfortable for people who rely on control. Because control needs predictability, and you stopped being predictable the moment you stopped reacting. You didn't change your behavior dramatically. You didn't become louder or more assertive. You became consistent. Your tone stayed steady. Your presence stayed calm. Your decisions stayed aligned, and that consistency created contrast. The contrast between who they thought you were and who you actually are. That's when their world began to crumble. Not externally, but internally. Their mental model stopped working. They couldn't place you anymore, couldn't categorize you, couldn't anticipate your reactions. And when someone's mental model fails, they don't feel threatened. They feel exposed. Because exposure isn't about being seen by others. It's about seeing yourself clearly for the first time. They started questioning their own judgment. How did I misread this? What else did I get wrong? Was I projecting confidence instead of understanding? Those questions don't come with answers right away. They come with discomfort, and you noticed something important in that moment. You didn't feel satisfied. You didn't feel victorious. You felt neutral. Because this wasn't about them losing something. It was about you never playing the game they thought you were in. You weren't competing. You weren't positioning yourself against them. You were moving on a different axis entirely. While they measured power through perception, you measured it through self-mastery. While they relied on reaction, you relied on regulation. While they focused on appearances, you focused on patterns. That's why the shift didn't require action from you. It required time. Time for truth to surface. Time for consistency to reveal itself. Time for their assumptions to run into reality. And when that collision happened, it wasn't loud. It was quiet. A silence where certainty used to be. A hesitation where confidence once lived. You saw it in the way they paused before speaking, in the way their tones softened without intention, in the way they checked your reaction and didn't find the confirmation they were looking for. You didn't change, they did internally. And here's the part that matters most. You didn't enjoy that moment because you don't define yourself by comparison. You define yourself by alignment. You've already done the work they skipped. You sat with doubt instead of outsourcing confidence. You faced uncertainty instead of covering it with noise. You built discipline instead of relying on perception. That work made you stable. Stability doesn't react to collapse. It doesn't rush to explain. It doesn't capitalize on confusion. It stays where it is. And staying where you are is powerful when everyone else is scrambling to recalibrate. You didn't need to say, "I told you so." You didn't need acknowledgement because your clarity wasn't dependent on their understanding. You had already validated yourself through preparation. That's why, even as their internal world shifted, yours stayed intact. You didn't gain something new in that moment. You simply stopped being misread. And that difference is subtle but profound. You weren't elevated. You were revealed. Revealed as someone who doesn't rush. As someone who observes before deciding. As someone who doesn't confuse calm with lack of depth. And now, moving forward, you're aware of something else. This wasn't a one-time moment. It was a signal. A signal that moving quietly doesn't mean moving slowly. That restraint doesn't mean weakness. That preparation, when done privately, eventually becomes undeniable. You didn't break their world. Their world broke when it encountered reality. And you're still standing not above it, not against it, just outside of it, centered clear, unchanged. And as you continue forward, you know this isn't the end of the story. It's the point where perception begins to catch up to truth. What happens next doesn't require force. It doesn't require confrontation. It requires the same thing you've been doing all along, staying disciplined, staying aware, staying aligned. Because once someone's false narrative collapses, it doesn't rebuild the same way. And from here, everything continues. And now that continuation feels quieter, but heavier in meaning. Because after that moment, after you notice the shift in their eyes, the recalibration in their tone, something subtle happens inside you as well. Not pride, not relief, recognition. You recognize that this wasn't luck. It wasn't timing. It wasn't coincidence. It was the natural outcome of staying consistent while others were busy performing. You realize how long you've been walking with restraint, how many moments you chose observation over reaction, how often you resisted the urge to correct people who misunderstood you. That restraint didn't weaken you, it trained you. And now you understand something most people never do. Silence isn't empty. Silence is storage. It stores awareness. It stores clarity. It stores discipline. While they were spending energy maintaining an image, you were conserving yours. While they were reinforcing a story about themselves, you were questioning yours. While they were trying to look certain, you were learning how to sit with uncertainty. That difference compounds. You didn't just prepare for a moment, you prepared for any moment. That's why, when their assumptions collapsed, you didn't feel the need to react. You didn't feel the need to capitalize on confusion or assert dominance. You didn't need to step forward, you were already standing. And you start to see how fragile confidence built on misjudgment really is. How quickly it wavers when reality doesn't cooperate. How exposed it feels when the person it underestimated refuses to play along. You didn't threaten them, you didn't confront them. You simply stopped fitting the role they assigned you. That alone was enough. Because people who rely on fixed narratives need others to stay predictable, when someone quietly evolves beyond the role given to them, it forces everyone else to update their understanding or face the discomfort of being wrong. And discomfort is where growth should happen, but often doesn't. You can see that now. You notice how they hesitate instead of reflect, how they search for external explanations instead of internal ones, how they replay moments, trying to find the exact point where control slipped. They're not angry, they're unsettled, and being unsettled isn't dangerous, it's revealing. It shows you how much of their certainty was borrowed, how much of their confidence depended on others staying small, how much of their worldview required you to remain misread. That realization doesn't harden you, it softens you in a grounded way. You don't feel superior. You feel clear that you never needed to be seen as powerful to be effective. Clear that you never needed to dominate to move forward. Clear that the strongest position you ever took was staying aligned when it would have been easier to react. You also begin to understand why this moment feels anticlimactic, because it's not a victory. It's confirmation that discipline works even when it's invisible. Confirmation that preparation doesn't need witnesses. Confirmation that patience eventually intersects with reality. You didn't win against someone. You stayed consistent with yourself. That's a very different outcome. And now, as you continue moving forward, you notice how your relationship with people changes subtly. You don't over-explain anymore. You don't rush to clarify misunderstandings that don't matter. You don't feel compelled to correct every false assumption. You trust time, because you've seen what time does to stories built on shortcuts. You are also more selective with your energy, not defensive, intentional. You engage where there's honesty. You step back where there's performance. You listen without absorbing. That selectivity isn't arrogance, it's respect for yourself. You've learned that not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Some misunderstandings dissolve on their own when faced with consistency, and you've become consistent in how you speak, in how you move, in how you decide. That consistency makes you harder to misread over time, not because you're transparent, but because you're coherent. Your words match your actions. Your tone matches your intent. Your silence matches your awareness. There's no contradiction to exploit. That's why others now struggle to project onto you the way they used to. Projections need gaps. They need uncertainty. They need emotional leakage. You closed those gaps quietly, and in doing so, you removed the leverage. You also start to notice something else. You're no longer interested in how others recover from being wrong about you. You don't wait for apologies. You don't seek acknowledgement. You don't track who realizes what and when. That chapter feels irrelevant because your growth didn't happen for them. It happened because you needed it. You needed to know who you were without. You needed to know how you move under pressure. You needed to know whether you could hold your center when misjudged. Know you know, and knowing that gives you a quiet confidence that doesn't fluctuate with circumstances. You're not calm because everything is fine. You calm because you've been through uncertainty and didn't collapse. That calm stays with you. It changes how you face the future. You're no longer afraid of being underestimated. You see it as space, space to observe, space to prepare, space to move without interference. You don't need to correct perceptions immediately. You understand that truth doesn't need urgency. It needs consistency. You also understand that not everyone will update their view of you at the same pace. Some will adjust quickly, some will resist. Some will never fully recalibrate, and that's fine. Because your stability doesn't depend on consensus, it depends on alignment. You've aligned your actions with your values, your pace with your capacity, your silence with your awareness. That alignment is portable. It goes with you into new rooms, new challenges, new uncertainties. You don't need to reinvent yourself. You don't need to prove anything again. You've already tested yourself in conditions that didn't favor you. That's why you're not shaken by this shift. You don't rush to capitalize on it. You don't change your posture. You simply continue, and continuing after being misjudged and then quietly understood feels different. It feels lighter, not because the world suddenly became fair, but because you stopped carrying the weight of being misunderstood. You let that weight drop when you realized it was never yours to carry in the first place. You don't need people to see you clearly to move forward. You just need to see yourself clearly, and you do. You see your patience, your discipline, your restraint. You see how you stayed grounded when things felt unstable, how you chose awareness over impulse, how you trusted preparation over performance. Those qualities don't disappear. They compound. They make you harder to shake. They make you slower to react and quicker to understand. They make you reliable to yourself. That's the real shift. Not that someone else's world crumbled internally, but that yours didn't. It stayed intact while narratives collapsed around it. And now, as you step into whatever comes next, you're not stepping forward with force. You're stepping forward with clarity. Clarity that doesn't argue. Clarity that doesn't rush. Clarity that doesn't need validation. You're not above anyone. You're not against anyone. You're simply operating from a place they never considered prepared, aware, aligned. And from here, everything you build will rest on that foundation quietly, intentionally, without needing to announce itself, because the strongest position you ever took was staying exactly who you are while everything else rearranged itself around you.